Hi, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be working on these super fun and easy Geek Chic cards. And we're going to start out with the Geek Chic stamp set. Now, I got these stamp sets that we're using today when I was a member of the 2017 to 2018 Designer Showcase team. So what I'm showing you with this additional stamp set is that there is a panel that comes with your images printed on it, and your image is also printed on the cling foam on the back of your stamps normally. Because I got these stamps to use as preliminary stamps to make some preview images with, they do not have those images on there, and I had to stamp my own indexes for these stamps. So I'm starting out with the grid paper background stamp. Right now I'm inking that in Tin Pale ink. This puts some very fine lines, so I'm just making sure I've really got this inked up before I bring my paper to it. And I'm just laying my paper on top of that stamp and making sure that the entire paper makes contact with that rubber. Now you can use your crease tool just to make sure that you get contact with that paper. So pull that off and you can see the image on there. And I'm going to clean this stamp off because I'm going to stamp my second background while I have this out. So I'm going to be inking this one in Pool Play. Once again, I'm going to be stamping on an A2 size piece of whipped cream cardstock. So both of these card backgrounds are starting out the same, just a different color of ink for each one. I'm going to go ahead and lay that paper on and just make sure that all of that paper is making contact with the surface of that stamp. Now this background stamp is just slightly smaller than that A2 size. It's actually meant to be a card front size. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim 1/8 of an inch off of all the sides on these two backgrounds so that I can cut off the portion that is not stamped. I've mentioned this in several other videos, but when I do background stamps, I like to save trimming my piece until after I have stamped the image, because then I can make adjustments as necessary if the stamp didn't land exactly center. So now I'm working on my center panels for each of the stamps. And I'm kind of going back and forth here measuring out the images because I do want these to be sized similarly, but I needed to make sure that the images were going to fit. So I'm cutting these at 2.5 inches wide. I'm actually going to wait to adjust the height until after I have stamped them, just to make sure I'm getting things kind of centered on the panel. I'm starting out with that computer image stamp, and I'm going to heat emboss this panel. So I'm going to use some colorless pan pastel over the top of the panel to make sure that none of that black embossing powder sticks anywhere that I don't want it. So I'm stamping my image with clear pigment ink, and I'm just stamping it towards the top of that panel, and I'm going to put embossing powder on it. I'm not going to heat set it just yet though. I'm going to actually put my sentiment below it and get the powder on that so I can melt it all at once. And if you get powder in some little random areas where it's sticking, you can use a small brush just to brush that out of the way. Getting my heat tool nice and hot before I actually take it to the cardstock makes everything melt much nicer, and it also keeps the paper from warping nearly as much as it can if you're letting it heat up on the paper. So I had a little black spot on there that I'm not quite sure where it came from. It didn't feel raised like it was embossing powder, but I'm just using the mono sand eraser to kind of take that off of my paper. And I'm going to trim this down to size. I actually took off about 3/4 of an inch total on the length of that panel. So I'm laying it out on my background, and I'm realizing that the background is just a little bit plain with it. So I'm going to take the little pocket protector with the pens in it, and I'm going to stamp that with Riverstone. So this is the tin pail background, so this is just going to be a darker tone of that gray on that tin pail background. And I'm just kind of randomly putting that all over the background, making sure to change up the angle as I go, just for some varied interest. Now I'm going to attach that center panel using some foam squares to pop it up for some dimension. And I'm using a whipped cream top folding card base on each of these cards today. So I'm going to use the Easy Glide Permanent Adhesive Runner, and I'm actually going to attach that card front to my card base. Got to make sure that I've got the top going next to the fold instead of having it upside down. I have done that before. Not fun to have to pull off your card front for that. So I had one little extra thing I wanted to add. I have some little googly eyes. Now, Fun Stamper's Journey has some googly eyes, which I am going to link in the product list on my blog. However, these were some that I just had randomly in my stash. So I'm using some glue dots to attach the eyes. And so the glue dots come off on that little bit of clear acetate. So I can actually attach the glue dot to the eyeball and leave that acetate on there, so I can have these ready to go as soon as I'm ready to attach them. And once you're ready to attach them, you just pull that acetate off and you can just adhere that down. So I attached those little googly eyes in the glasses. It's just kind of a little fun element to that. So we'll start on the second card. I've got that Pool Play stamped background here, and I'm going to go ahead and take, I think it's the Atom stamp with it, and I'm going to stamp that in 3 colors. I'm going to stamp Lemon Drop, Candy Apple, and Limeade Splash. I'm going to stamp one of each color on these alternating corners here. So just clean the stamp off really good in between each of the colors, and then you can go ahead and just switch colors. I always tend to start with my lightest and work up to my brighter or darker color. Reds tend to transfer pretty easy, so I usually try and leave that to last. So finally stamping in that Candy Apple color. This is kind of a fun, bright pattern to go with the stamp set. And I just have a baby wipe. I have a piece of glass over the top of my craft mat, and so I'm just wiping off that ink so I don't get that transferred all over all my panels in between. So I have my center panel here, and I'm going to take that Atom stamp, and I'm going to stamp it once again in the Riverstone ink. And I have cleaned this off very, very well before I did that, just because I had used that Candy Apple beforehand. I'm going to take the Candy Apple and use that for my sentiment this time around. So I'm going to trim off the ends on this. I believe I took about 3/8 of an inch off of either side. And just lining that up just to make sure that everything looks good. Folding my card base in half, and this time I'm going to attach the card front first, and then I'll attach the sentiment panel after I have that attached to the card. Really doesn't matter what order you do it in. I just kind of did it in 2 different ways this time. And there you have it, two very simple, clean and easy cards with the Geek Chic stamp set and the grid paper background. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you find something to be inspired with this. The full product list will be listed over on my blog, and I hope to see you in the next video. Much love to you all.